The boy's hand was trembling when I found them, him and his mother, standing by a broken wagon in the middle of the wasteland. I'd seen that kind of fear before. The kind that didn't come from the dark, but from men. Men with guns and nothing left inside them. I'd told myself years ago I wouldn't step in again. Not after the last time I tried to be the hero and buried friends instead. But something about that woman's eyes, wide, hollow, too calm for her own good, dragged me back into the mess I thought I'd left behind. The wind carried the echo of hooves before I saw the bandits. 4 of them, riding fast, dust trailing like smoke from a fire that wouldn't die. The woman, Ilara, I learned later, pulled the boy behind her, clutching a rusted kitchen knife like it could stop a bullet. I didn't have time to think. My rifle came up out of habit, not choice. 2 shots. The first dropped the lead horse. The second sent the others scattering. They fired back, shouted curses I'd heard before in a dozen dying towns, but they weren't used to someone shooting back with purpose. When the silence finally settled, it was the kind that makes your ears ring. The boy peeked from behind her skirt, brown eyes full of shock and something worse. Hope. I hate that look. Hope gets people killed. You hurt? I asked. She shook her head, still breathing fast. No, I thank you. Don't, I said, turning away. Just move. They'll be back when they stop bleeding. I started walking toward my horse, expecting the sound of their steps fading the other way. Instead, I heard the boy whisper, "Mama, I'm cold." That stopped me. Not because of the words, but because it was the same tone I'd once heard from my brother before the fever took him, back when I still had a home to lose. I cursed under my breath. There's a ridge east, an old way station below it. You can stay there tonight, she hesitated. You'll leave us there? That's the idea. Her eyes met mine, defiant, grateful, and scared all at once. We can manage. Doubt it, I muttered, mounting up. But I'm not arguing with you. Follow or don't, they followed. People always do when they've got nowhere else to go. We reached the station by dusk. The roof sagged, the sign half gone, but there was a stone wall that had blocked most of the wind. I gathered wood, pretending I didn't notice her hand shaking as she tried to start the fire. The boy clung to her skirt until I handed him a match. Your turn, kid, I said. He smiled, just barely, and lit the flame on the first try. We ate in silence. Dried meat, stale bread. She tore hers in half and slipped a piece to the boy when she thought I wasn't watching. That small motion, quiet sacrifice like it was nothing, cut through the noise in my head louder than the gunfire had. After a while, she asked, "Do you always ride alone?" Mostly. By choice? I didn't answer. The fire cracked between us. When the boy finally slept, she spoke again, voice soft but steady. Those men, they killed my husband 2 winters back. We've been moving ever since. I thought we'd outrun them. I didn't tell her that running never works. I just added another log to the fire and said, "You're safe for now." Her eyes lifted to me across the light, full of something I couldn't name. "For now," she repeated, like it was both a question and a prayer. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of gunpowder and rain. I lay back against the wall, hat pulled low, telling myself I'd leave at dawn. But when the boy stirred in his sleep, mumbling, I reached over and tossed another log into the fire. For now, that was enough. The storm rolled in before dawn, thin rain first, then wind that cut through bone. I'd meant to leave before the light changed, but the boy's cough echoed through the broken station walls, and that plan died easy. The woman, Ilara, was already awake, feeding the fire I'd left burning. Her hands moved with quiet purpose, like she'd been doing this all her life. I caught myself watching too long before I spoke. There's a cabin east of here. Mine. You can rest there till he's better. She didn't look up. We won't stay long. That's what everyone says. We packed what little we had and rode slow. The boy sat in front of her, wrapped in my old blanket. He clutched that wooden toy horse like it was worth gold. I kept to the front, watching the horizon, pretending I didn't hear her hum to calm him. It was an old tune. Frontier hymn, maybe. And for a few miles it almost drowned out the wind. By midday the cabin came into view, tucked under a ridge where the wind broke. Smoke stains above the door, patchwork roof, fence half gone, but it was home enough for me. She hesitated at the threshold, like stepping inside might mean something she couldn't take back. We'll just dry off and move on, she said. Sure, I lied. Inside the air smelled of pine and iron. I built the fire back up while she set Jonah near the stove. He fell asleep before the kettle even boiled. For a long minute, neither of us spoke. Just the crackle of wet wood, the hiss of water hitting the pot. Finally, she said, "You live here alone?" "Easier that way." She gave a half smile, more sadness than humor. "Easier, maybe, but not always better." I didn't answer. She started tidying, wiping the table, stacking the few plates I owned. She had no reason to, but I didn't stop her. Maybe because I liked the sound of someone moving in this quiet place. By nightfall, the wind had died, leaving only the steady pop of the stove. The boy slept under my old quilt, his small hand peeking out. I sat by the window, rifle across my knees, watching the dark. Habit more than fear. She came to stand beside me. "You think they'll come?" "They always do," I said. "Trouble's got a good memory." Her eyes flicked toward her son. "Then we'll leave before they find us." I looked at her, really looked this time. The worn hem of her dress, the dirt under her nails, the lines around her mouth carved by more than worry. "He won't make another cold night on the road. I've kept him alive this long." "I can see that," I said quietly. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore." She turned away, maybe to hide the tremor in her breath. "We don't take charity." "Then call it a trade," I said. "You cook. I keep the roof from leaking. Deal?" For the first time, her eyes softened. "Deal." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time the fire crackled, I thought of the men still out there licking their wounds, remembering my face. But when I heard Jonah mumble in his sleep, then sigh in peace, the thought quieted. Just before dawn, I stepped outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the world smelling of cedar and wet dust. Smoke drifted from the chimney, thin and silver in the half-light. I hadn't planned to keep them. Didn't plan on caring. But there was something about that small sound from inside, the creak of floorboards, a woman moving softly to tend the fire, that made the place feel less like hiding and more like living. When I walked back in, she was standing by the stove, hair loose, eyes half asleep. "You're up early," she murmured. "Old habit," I said. "Never trust quiet mornings," she smiled faintly, pouring coffee into a dented tin cup. "Maybe this one's different." I took the cup from her, felt the warmth seep into my hands, and for the first time in years, I didn't argue. It's strange how fast a place changes when there's laughter in it, especially when you've forgotten what that sounds like. 3 weeks. That's how long it's been since I found them on that road. Long enough for the wind to shift, for the silence to soften. Long enough for me to stop counting the days I'd planned to leave. Alara kept her word about the trade. She cooked, cleaned, mended what could be saved. My cabin hadn't seen that kind of care since my sister's visits years back. Every morning I'd wake to the smell of coffee and the low sound of Jonah humming to himself. Building fences from sticks outside the door. He'd follow me everywhere, asked 1,000 questions I didn't have answers for. Why do horses sleep standing up? Do bullets ever run out of sky? The kind of questions that remind you the world isn't as dark as you make it. Alara watched me sometimes from the porch while hanging clothes, her eyes curious but not prying. She never asked what I'd done before, why I lived this far from anyone else. Maybe she already knew not to dig in old wounds unless she meant to stay. One evening I came in from fixing the fence and found her sewing by lamplight. The glow hit her hair like copper fire. She was humming that same hymn again. Jonah had fallen asleep against her leg, his toy horse still in hand. "You should rest," I said. She smiled faintly without looking up. "You say that every night." "Because you never listen." She threaded the needle again, steady and sure. "Busy hands keep the mind quiet." I leaned on the doorway, arms crossed. "Quiet's not always peace." She paused, eyes lifting to mine. For a moment we just looked at each other, the fire popping between us. There was something in her gaze I hadn't seen since the war ended, understanding, without demand. Later, while she tucked Jonah into the cot, she asked, "Do you ever miss anyone?" I didn't expect the question, and I didn't lie either. "Every day. Some names fade slower than others." She nodded, her hand lingering on her boy's shoulder. "I know what that's like." The wind sighed against the walls, the stove ticking as it cooled. I poured 2 cups of coffee, set one beside her. We sat there a while, the kind of silence that isn't heavy anymore. By the next morning, the thaw began. Snow melting off the ridge, mud swallowing the old footprints. The sound of dripping water filled the air, soft and new. Jonah laughed, chasing a rooster that didn't even belong to us. It had wandered down from a neighbor's ranch. Alara laughed too, and I realized I'd never heard her laugh before. It was small, but it reached all the way inside my ribs, shaking dust from places I thought were long gone. Later that day, I caught her staring at the hills. "You thinking of leaving?" I asked. She turned to me, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I used to think moving meant surviving. Now I'm not so sure." I didn't answer right away. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "I know," she replied, voice calm. "But maybe we owe the boy a chance to stop running." Her words stayed with me all night. I watched the fire burn down to embers, her and Jonah sleeping on the bed while I took the chair. I thought about all the graves I'd seen, all the promises I'd broken, trying to live like the world didn't need me. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe I'd been wrong about what peace looked like. Maybe it wasn't silence or distance. Maybe it was this: a roof that creaked, a child's laugh echoing off the walls, and a woman who looked at me like I wasn't made of ghosts. When dawn crept in, I opened the door and let the light fall across the floorboards. I didn't move it shut again. I should have known peace don't last long out here. Not for men like me. We'd been living quiet for near a month. The snow gone, the creek running clear again, the boy healthy and full of questions. For a while it almost felt like we'd outrun the past. Then I made the mistake of riding into town. We needed supplies: flour, salt, lamp oil. Simple things. Alara wanted to come, said she hadn't seen a store in months. Jonah begged until I gave in. "Stay close," I told them, "and don't talk more than you have to." The town looked the same as ever. Crooked buildings, too many eyes watching from behind curtains. Folks out here remember faces, and mine had been in a few bad stories. At first, everything went smooth. Alara picked out what we needed while Jonah stared at jars of candy behind the counter. I caught myself smiling when the shopkeeper slipped the boy a peppermint. Then I saw them. 3 men by the saloon rail, the kind who wear their guns like jewelry. One of them I recognized, a scar running from his ear to his collar. Dalton Price. Used to ride with the same crew I left years back. Bandits. Killers. He was one of the men who'd attacked Alara's wagon. His eyes met mine, and I knew the quiet was over. "Well, I'll be," he drawled, pushing off the rail. "Didn't think you were still breathing, Ryder." "Keep it that way," I said, hand resting near my holster. He grinned, showing a mouth half silver. "You with the lady and kid? Thought you didn't do families." The whole street seemed to lean in at that. Alara froze by the door, her face pale. Jonah clutched her skirt, eyes darting between us. "Go inside," I told her. She didn't move. "Cale," I said inside. My voice came out sharper than I meant, but it did the job. Dalton laughed. "Didn't peg you for the settling type. What's next, preacher duties?" I turned to face him. "Walk away." He spat in the dirt, eyes cold. "You took something that wasn't yours, Ryder. That woman belonged to a man you left bleeding." That hit like a hammer. Ilara's breath caught behind me. "He's lying," she said, voice trembling. "I know," I said, but the words felt too thin against the stares gathering around. "Townsfolk don't care who's right. They care who bleeds first." The sheriff stepped out from the barber's shop, thumb hooked lazy over his belt. "Everything all right here?" Dalton grinned wider. "Just catching up with an old friend." "Might be he's harboring a wanted woman, though. That did it." The murmurs rose. I could feel the distance forming between me and everyone else. The same old weight settling on my shoulders again. I grabbed the supplies, handed the sack to Alara. "Take Jonah. Go." She hesitated. "What about—" "Go." They left, and I stayed, because someone had to make sure Dalton didn't follow. By sundown, I came back to the cabin. Alara stood by the fire, arms crossed tight. Jonah was asleep on the bed. The quiet between us was heavier than any bullet. "You lied to me," she said softly. "You said we were safe." "I didn't lie," I said. "I just hoped it was true." Her eyes glistened in the firelight. "They'll come again." "And if they do, Jonah, I'll handle it." She shook her head. "No, I won't risk him. We have to leave." I stepped closer, wanting to tell her she didn't have to, that I could keep them safe. But the words tangled somewhere between pride and fear. "Maybe you should," I finally said. The look she gave me then hurt worse than any wound I'd taken. Not anger, just disappointment. She packed in silence. By dawn, the cabin door closed behind her. The sound of that latch will stay with me longer than any gunshot. Outside, The wind carried the smell of rain again, like the first night I found them. Only this time the fire inside the cabin burned alone. The morning she left, the world went silent. Even the creek stopped talking. I'd spent years chasing quiet, but that day it felt like punishment. Her shawl was still hanging by the door. The boy's toy horse sat on the table, one wheel missing. I told myself I'd leave them be. She'd made her choice, and maybe it was better that way. But every time the wind shifted, I thought I heard Jonah's voice calling, "Mister, come look." By noon, I was already saddling my horse. The trail was easy to follow, 2 sets of small footprints in wet clay, heading south toward town. The same town where Dalton Price and his men drank their luck dry. I knew what they'd do once they found her again. They didn't forgive debt or pride, and Alara had both. The sky turned to iron by the time I reached the ridge. Rain threatened, thunder crawling low. That sound, the same one from the night I met them, felt like a warning. I pressed harder. I found them near the old bridge at Dry Creek. Dalton had her by the arm, Jonah crying behind a wagon. 2 of his men were laughing, guns loose at their sides. "Let her go," I said. Dalton turned, grin split by rain. "You always were too late, Ryder." "Maybe," I said, raising my rifle. But not today. The shot echoed through the canyon, sharp and final. The others scrambled for cover, but I didn't give them time. The rain came down in sheets, thunder drowning everything else. When it ended, only one sound remained, Jonah calling for his mother. She ran to him, holding him close. I stood there, breath burning, the world spinning slow. Dalton lay still in the mud, face to the sky. Alara turned to me, soaked and shaking. "You shouldn't have come." "Wasn't planning to," I said. "But plans don't hold up well in storms." She stepped closer, eyes fierce but wet. "He could have killed you." He tried. For a long moment, we just stood there, the rain washing away blood, fear, everything. Then Jonah reached out his small hand and said, "You're bleeding." I looked down. "Shoulder graze. Nothing new?" "Just a scratch," I said, though the world tilted a bit. Alara tore a piece from her skirt and pressed it against me. "Always fixing things that ain't yours," I muttered. She smiled faintly. "Guess it's a habit." By the time we made it back to the cabin, the storm had broken. The sky cracked open to orange and gold. The fire inside still burned, weak but waiting. I hung my hat, sat at the table. Jonah set his wooden horse beside my hand. "Mama says we can stay a while." "If you want." Alara looked up from the stove, the light catching her face. "You don't have to keep us, Cale." "I know," I said, voice rough. "But maybe I want to." For once she didn't argue. She just turned back to stir the pot, and in that small sound, the spoon against the tin, the boy humming quietly, I felt something I hadn't in years. Home. When night came, the wind blew gentle against the windows. Jonah slept near the fire, his toy horse beside him. Alara sat across from me, mending the tear in my coat. "You could have died today," she said softly. "I could have died a dozen yesterdays," I answered. "But today felt worth it." She met my gaze, steady and warm. "Then maybe it's time to stop riding alone." I didn't trust my voice enough to speak, so I just nodded. Outside, the storm clouds drifted west, leaving the sky clean. The stars came out slow, like they'd been waiting for us to look up. I leaned back in the chair, watching her hands move in the lamplight. "You know," I said quietly, "I never figured myself for family." Alara smiled. "That's the thing about family, Cale. You don't choose it. It finds you." I looked over at Jonah, his small chest rising steady in sleep, and for the first time since the war, I believed her. The wind settled. The fire cracked soft. Outside, the land smelled of rain and new beginnings, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to leave.